This is Zeke, a young mage, who throughout his life built up a massive army of shadows. An army that's powerful, intangible, and levels him up with every kill. I feel like I've seen this somewhere before. It all began when, still just a baby, he realized a simple truth. If the theory behind idle games could be applied in another world, he could become the strongest. In his past life in Japan, he lived for those games, a genre made for people crushed by overwork, where the game keeps progressing on its own, even with the screen turned off. With just a few simple taps, the character grows stronger over time. He wasn't just a player, though. He was also a programmer who developed those very same games, until one day, without any explanation, he woke up in a crib. His version back on Earth had likely died, the cause being worked to death. He was employed by a company so brutal that a single week of sleepless nights would be enough to kill anyone. But whether by fate or the will of some god, he was given a new life. And brushing aside how insane the whole thing was, he decided he was going to make the most of it. His plan was simple: live his life like an idle game, leveling up effortlessly to become the strongest in the world. To pull that off, first he needed to learn about this new world. So by the age of 3, he was already deep into his studies. That's when his mother finds him reading a book on the fundamentals of magic, and after revealing she used to read that same book back when she was an adventurer and mage herself, she offers to read it with Zeke. Being an adventurer, she explains, was a versatile job, sometimes hunting monsters, other times gathering herbs. She then asks how magic actually works, and Zeke surprisingly explains it, leaving her a little stunned that he could already read. Well, using a child's ability to soak up information and the mind of an adult, he had learned to read by watching menus and listening to customer orders. His mother quickly starts calling him a genius. She then teaches him that magic is cast by using the body's mana to draw a circle in the air. To show him, she conjures a small flame, which leaves the boy completely fascinated. For someone who had lived in modern Japan, seeing something like that was quite the experience. Suddenly, his father calls out from the kitchen, saying he needs a hand, and before heading off, she encourages him to start by simply feeling his own mana. His mother had retired as an adventurer after marrying his father, another former adventurer, and together they run a small restaurant. Zeke then wonders how long it will take to put his theory into practice. Well, by the age of 5, he was already training how to control his mana. His focus now was on sensing and moving that energy through every part of his body. He trained so much that he could now channel his mana freely, even while he was asleep. With his control mastered, the feeling of materializing his mana was, to say the least, incredibly satisfying. Suddenly, his father comes rushing in and scoops him up, excitedly asking if the boy had been practicing his mana control. And Zeke confirms, saying he can now even manipulate his mana separately from his body. His father, though, doesn't get any of it, admitting he was always hopeless with magic. As he carries him downstairs, he keeps wondering how his son could possibly be doing all that. But setting that aside, he says he's got the day off and is going to take him outside to play, so he wouldn't just be cooped up in the house. Since Zeke was going to become an adventurer, his father suggests he also learn how to fight with a sword. His parents were certain he'd go down that path, and honestly, he did plan on it, so he could travel and explore this new world. After all, this world was full of fantastic races, like elves and dwarves. On top of that, he needed to level up. That's right, the concept of levels, something he knew well from RPGs, existed here too. Levels went up by defeating monsters, boosting your physical abilities and mana. Right now, of course, he was just level 1. His father, on the other hand, being a veteran adventurer, had a pretty high level. And so, father and son begin training together, so that one day Zeke could at least travel on his own. His father tells him not to block the strike head-on, but instead to sidestep it and move his whole body along with the sword. And of course, Zeke pulls off the technique right away, making his father burst with pride. Still, there was no way he was going to let it slide, and he ends up disarming the boy. He scolds him, saying, an adventurer should never drop his guard during combat. After all, one slip like that could cost you your life. But despite the scolding, he praises Zeke's performance, wrapping him up in a tight hug. And the boy could only complain about his father's scratchy stubble. Time passes, and by his 7th year in that world, Zeke was ready for the next step. His parents were just as nervous as they were the day Zeke first learned to walk. His mother then asks him what kind of magic he plans to try first. And he answers excitedly that he's going to try water magic, specifically water creation. So with his parents cheering him on, Zeke starts to focus, gathering his mana to materialize water for the very first time. With a smile on his face, our boy manages to create a perfect sphere of water, and his parents shower him with praise, so proud of how brilliantly he controlled his mana. His mother explains that water mages are in huge demand within adventurer parties, which would make him incredibly sought after. Seeing how happy they were made Zeke feel like all his hard work had paid off, kicking off the creation of his idle game theory. Back in his room, he reflects that, now that he's got the basics of magic down, he can finally start his grand plan. His goal was to create a character that would grow stronger on its own, just like in the games he used to play in his past life. To make that concept a reality, our hero starts testing out different spells to bring this creature to life. He begins sketching out various magic circles on paper, and among his ideas, he ends up ruling out fire magic for being way too dangerous. Earth magic would require rare stones, while wind and water didn't seem all that useful for creating a warrior. With that in mind, he flips through the book, looking for something with a humanoid shape that could serve as a base. That's when he finally lands on the perfect page, which detailed the summoning of a shadow puppet. He then recites the incantation, and right before his eyes, a completely dark silhouette emerges. To his surprise, the 4th level shadow puppet summon works perfectly on his very first try. The boy is genuinely impressed with himself, since the book said only experienced mages could ever pull off such a feat. In that world, magic was categorized by difficulty levels and elemental attributes. Ranging from the 1st to the 15th level, the higher the rank, the more destructive and complex the spell became. And since the shadow puppet fell into the 4th level, it was already considered a high-class spell. Well, his sleepless nights training mental control made using light and dark magic a whole lot easier. So, he starts testing the creature out by ordering it to turn around, and then commands it to attack him with a punch. But the puppet's fist passes right through his body, revealing that it has no physical strength and can't touch anything at all. With that, the boy goes back to the book, determined to test out the creature's other abilities. And he quickly decides to try the shared vision ability so he could see through the puppet's eyes. But out of nowhere, an unbearable headache hits the poor guy. His mind struggles hard trying to process two different views at the same time, and he quickly realizes that in order to use shared vision, he'll have to keep his own eyes shut. So he orders the puppet to take a few steps forward and hide. In an instant, the creature sinks straight into the ground and waits for its next command. Zeke notices that inside the shadows, he can't see or feel a thing, and orders the creature to come back. Once he cuts off the visual link, the shadow puppet begins to fade, and glancing at the book, he catches an important detail. The creature stays active until its summoner runs completely out of mana. The problem is that to make it work like an idle game, the puppet has to keep following ongoing orders with a single simple command. Zeke tries to figure out a way to test this, but realizes the creature can't even pick up a tiny pebble from the yard. That lack of physical presence was a major obstacle, and our hero knew he'd have to solve it before anything else. He then remembers the veteran adventurers who regularly hang out at his parents' restaurant and decides to head downstairs to ask them for help. Once he gets to the lower floor, Zeke greets everyone, and the group of adventurers welcomes him with big smiles. One of them immediately starts affectionately ruffling the boy's hair, acting like they'd been family for years. That big guy was Zephyrd, the leader of the group and a skilled greatsword user. Sitting next to him was Flora, the charismatic mage of the group. The young lady dressed like a nun was Lastel, the one in charge of healing everyone's injuries out on missions. And rounding out the veterans was Gernara, the fearless warrior of the team. They were all old adventuring buddies of Zeke's father, and practically clocked in at the restaurant every single day. Flora quickly strikes up a conversation, saying she'd heard the boy had been practicing magic non-stop. Lastel praises him too, saying he's incredibly focused, and that at his age, all she did was play with dolls. Which makes Zephyrd start laughing right in her face, teasing his teammate about her childhood. Out of patience, Lastel pulls out a spiked mace and slams it into the table right in his face, telling the big guy to shut it. After the scare, Gernard decides to turn his attention to the boy and asks what brought him down to the restaurant that day. Working up the courage, Zeke asks the mage and the healer if they've ever tried modifying the structure of a spell. Well, both of them are pretty surprised at such a complex question coming from such a young kid. Flora explains that even though she learned about it at the Magic Academy, most people prefer to use the circles exactly as they appear in the books. Lastel agrees, revealing that the magical theory taught at the church was pretty basic, and she almost never tried to modify it. Not knowing how to answer, Flora decides to shout to Zeke's mother in the kitchen, asking if she knows anything about the subject. But his mother admits she doesn't know anything beyond what's written in the basic magic book either. Suddenly, Zephyrd bursts out laughing, flexing his muscles and saying nobody needs magic when they've got strong arms. But the girls quickly call him an idiot. Seeing the massive sword on the warrior's back, Zeke has a flash of genius and comes up with an idea for how to combine magic and weapons. So the boy says goodbye and rushes back upstairs. Once in his room, Zeke quickly shuts the door and starts conjuring his shadow puppet once again, and he celebrates pulling off the spell on the first try. Zeke then draws a new circle and casts the second level spell Shadow Sword, materializing a dark blade. Since the sword is made purely of mana, Zeke theorizes his shadow puppet will be able to interact with it and orders it to grab the weapon. And without any trouble at all, the creature's dark hand grips the hilt. Seeing it worked, Zeke celebrates. He confirms his theory. The puppet passes right through physical objects, but can touch things made of mana, giving it attack power. Thrilled with the success of his first character in his idle game plan, the boy tries to greet it with a handshake, but his hand passes right through the creature, since the puppet is still intangible to humans. Setting that aside, Zeke decides to test whether the puppet can follow ongoing orders, and commands it to hide in the shadows. He activates shared vision and orders the creature to head straight into the backyard. Through the puppet's eyes, he watches the journey. Zeke sees that the backyard is empty and orders the puppet to draw markings on the ground all night long, hiding if anyone shows up. With that, the boy finally heads to bed, eagerly anticipating the results of his experiment first thing in the morning. The next day, he uses shared vision and sees the ground of the yard covered in perfectly drawn markings. Zeke celebrates the successful test, confirming that the creature follows his orders to the letter over long stretches of time. Excited, he decides it's time to send the shadow puppet out to hunt in the forest. And following the command, the creature begins moving beyond the property line. But the moment the first rays of sunlight hit it, the creature dissolves into thin air, Zeke realizes he forgot a crucial weakness. Shadow puppets completely vanish when exposed to sunlight. Even with the setback, he stays optimistic, knowing the road to becoming the strongest is paved with mistakes and lessons. Once night falls, he decides to put his plan into action again, summoning 5 puppets at once to kick off the operation in the forest. Through shared vision with one of them, Zeke gets to see the city of Edna's from the outside for the very first time. Well, he's absolutely stunned by the view. He watches his creations march through the forest, finally putting into motion the project he'd been planning since the day he was reincarnated. Since they can't handle sunlight, the boy sends them to hunt only at night, focusing his vision on just one of the 5 bodies. He soon spots some slimes, easy monsters to take down, though he'd prefer to run into goblins so he could level up faster. However, the search proves difficult, and the creatures don't seem to find any monsters nearby. He grumbles that real life isn't as easy as in games, where enemies pop up out of nowhere, but suddenly, one of the puppets spots some enemies, and Zeke quickly orders them to gather and silently surround the trio of goblins that were feasting on a wild boar. Apologizing for ruining their dinner, Zeke gives the command to attack, and his first puppet slits one of the monster's throats. The others try to react, but are instantly impaled by the swords of the other shadow puppets. Seconds later, the 3 monsters lay defeated on the ground. Even though he finds the carnage a little rough to see up close in real life, our boy tries to shake off the bad feeling as he watches the bodies go still. Focusing on the experience he was about to gain, he sets the puppets to automatic mode, ordering them to hunt all night without ever attacking humans. The next morning, Zeke wakes up bursting with energy and throws a kick into the air to test his agility, eager to see if he'd gotten any stronger. And to his absolute delight, a status screen confirms that he had finally leveled up to 2, proud that he'd gotten his idle game theory to work perfectly in this world. He celebrates with a jump. Checking the yard, Zeke sees the number 10 drawn on the ground and realizes his creations had defeated 10 monsters. He feels his mana and physical strength grow significantly. Wanting to speed up his progress even more, our hero decides that his body can now handle summoning 3 more shadow puppets. He does the new summoning and orders the creatures to hide in his shadow during the day and head out to hunt in the forest at night. Following the order, the new soldiers silently slip into the darkness of the forest trees. Seeing it all coming together, Zeke starts daydreaming about creating a shadow army to one day take on the Demon King himself. He pictures himself as a mighty sovereign atop a throne, leading an entire legion of shadows into battle. But snapping back to reality, he knows that to make that dream come true, he needs to solve the problem of the shadows vanishing under sunlight. What really puzzles him is the fact that shadow swords, which are also made of pure mana, don't disappear in the sun. Determined to dig deeper, he heads downstairs thinking he should start by analyzing the structure of the basic magic circles. Zeke studies the shape of the runes in his hand, realizing the patterns drawn there must have very specific meanings. Walking into the kitchen, his parents greet him, and the boy excitedly announces he's going to practice a little magic in the yard. His father smiles at his son's determination and offers him some sandwiches, suggesting he eat first before training. Zeke accepts the food and rushes outside, saying he can't rest once he gets a new idea in his head. Out in the backyard, the boy decides to use his water creation magic to start the day's tests. A sphere of water floats perfectly above his magic circle, and he notices that, after so much practice, he can now cast first-level spells without having to recite a single word. Zeke then wipes his mouth and gets ready for the real research work. He decides to analyze simpler spells before trying to alter complex magic, and conjures a new circle in front of him. Zeke chooses to test the earth magic Stone Bullet, a second-level ability that shoots rocks using mana. He figures that, being only level 2, the spell shouldn't create anything too destructive for now. Calmly, the boy starts analyzing the runic circle and decides to remove the portion responsible for generating the rock itself. That's when a small pebble drops to the ground, leaving the boy a little confused by the result. He realizes that by breaking down the runic circle that way, the spell loses its effect entirely. Determined to test the other part of the circle, Zeke channels his mana and fires off the Stone Bullet at full force. However, the shot backfires and the mana explosion launches him flying backwards. A gigantic rock ends up being shot out and completely destroys a huge tree right in front of him. Zeke is stunned to realize the damage was infinitely greater than he had planned. Panicked, he realizes he broke down the spell's safety circle and ended up creating a total catastrophe. Hearing the deafening noise, his parents come rushing into the yard, desperate to know if their son was okay. They both start checking the boy over to see if he'd been attacked by some bandit or wind mage. His father looks at the destruction all around and asks if the culprit hurled that giant rock straight at him. Well, Zeke feels totally awkward, realizing the true culprit behind all that mess was right there in his mother's arms. To make things worse, the city guards show up right after, and the boy takes the chance to lie, saying the supposed attacker had fled far away. In the end, the search for the non-existent criminal was called off, and the case was closed by the local authorities. Even after that big mess, our boy stayed committed to his magical research, racking up failures and small successes over the years. He spent quite a lot of time deciphering runes, and finally he pulled off an impressive breakthrough. The boy managed to rewrite the magic circle and upgraded the shadow puppet so it could withstand direct sunlight. Years went by, and now at 12 years old, Zeke finally hits level 7, getting closer to his dream of traveling the world. He kept sending his shadow puppets out to hunt in the forest every single night, piling up experience nonstop. Now that his creations could operate freely both day and night, the pace of hunting and monster elimination shot up dramatically. With the boost in his runic mana, he became able to sustain and control even more shadows active at the same time. Now Zeke looks back with amusement at all the little disasters he'd caused around the house to complete his spell modification research. On top of that, he's now capable of casting all the basic elemental spells listed in his study grimoire. His new goal is to keep sharpening his specialty while also refining his use of every other magical element. After going through the books over and over, Zeke realized that the basic spells in there were just simplified versions of harder ones. He found it really strange that the Shadow Sword could handle sunlight, while the Shadow Puppet, which was a higher level spell, would vanish during the day. Digging into other spells, he developed a runic formula capable of repelling the mana particles contained in sunlight. By integrating that new runic defense into the shadows, he created an upgraded version of the puppet that doesn't disappear during the day. Well, the Shadow Puppet was the only 4th level spell available for study in his book, so he closes the book, really curious to see what other advanced 4th level spells out there in the world might be like. However, that basic book only offered surface level explanations, and there was no way to get his hands on more advanced grimoires in that small town. But now that he'd reached level 7, he wanted to see just how far he could push this extraordinary power. In his past life on Earth, his routine boiled down to going from home to the office, with several of his projects getting rejected. But since fate had reincarnated him into a new world of fantasy, the mysterious landscapes he used to dream about, filled with vast dungeons, dangerous monsters, and other races, were now real. Seeing all that fantasy up close with his own eyes would be pretty amazing. Suddenly, his parents call out to him, since he was running late for a big commitment. As they walk, the boy remembers that he had already sent his shadow puppets to hunt deeper in the forest to keep them from running into each other. His father asks if this was actually the first time he'd stepped foot in the forest, and the boy confirms. In a way, it wasn't a lie, but it kind of was. After all, he already knew every inch of the place thanks to his shadow puppets, which is when his father warns him to never drop his guard. But his mother comes to his defense, reminding them that their son is a real genius who mastered rare magic at such an early age. Zeke prefers to keep his real strength hidden, so no one would question how he leveled up so fast without ever hunting on his own. On top of that, he knows dark magic is banned in some countries, though its use is allowed there. He just thinks it's better if his parents don't know his true level. His mother then says he could study at the Magic Academy and that they wouldn't need to worry about the tuition. But the boy responds that he doesn't want to just be an academic, he wants to be an active adventurer. His mother sighs at his choice, saying he's humble like her, but his father quickly teases her, saying she's never been humble a day in her life. Hearing that, the mood shifts instantly, and a dark, terrifying look takes over his mother's face. She pulls out her staff and threatens her husband with a powerful spell, making the poor guy beg for his life. Seconds later, a massive explosion echoes through the forest, silencing any joke from Zeke's father for good. Shortly after, the boy's father spots some fresh tracks in the dirt, warning that some wild creature had passed through recently. Up ahead, a pack of fierce wolves appears. Zeke knows low-level monsters like these are common around there, far from the dangerous legendary beasts that dwell in the deeper regions. Seeing the opportunity, his father suggests Zeke try taking on the monsters by himself to test his skills in real combat. His parents hide in the bushes and tell him to be careful, promising to step in if things got dangerous. The boy positions himself behind a tree and starts casting his runic spell, setting up a trap for the wolves. He unleashes the chains of light, which instantly bind and immobilize the pack of beasts. Wasting no time, Zeke conjures powerful blades of wind that slice through and defeat most of the trapped monsters. However, one last wolf manages to break free from the spell and lunges fiercely at him, forcing the boy to draw his iron sword. With a swift, precise slash, Zeke finishes off the last creature and calls the battle over. Beaming with pride, his parents shower him with affection and praise, blown away by how he'd fought with the precision of a veteran adventurer. Looking over at the beasts, Zeke asks what they should do now with the monsters' bodies. That's when his father steps up to one of the wolves to show him how to extract the fangs and the valuable magic stone found inside its heart. Carefully, he pulls out and shows the small glowing stone taken from the creature's chest. He explains that these crystals serve as an energy source and can be sold for a good price back in the city. The man adds that the hide of this species is also pretty valuable if it's removed with care. And so, training in the forest continued for weeks, with Zeke learning the tricks of the trade while pretending to level up slowly. Sometime later, the boy finally walks through the bustling streets of the big city. Sporting the new shoes and waist bag he'd gotten for his birthday, he knew the big moment had finally arrived. Following the rough directions of the cobblestone streets, Zeke finally spots his big destination. Standing before him was the imposing Adventurers Guild. The guild was a massive neutral organization spread across the entire world, answering to no specific kingdom. Because it operated outside government control, it was in charge of handing out jobs no other official channel could offer. Working up his nerve, our boy pushes open the massive wooden doors and steps into the main hall. Right off the bat, Zephyrd and Flora spot him and greet him with warm smiles. The warrior asks if he'd finally come to sign up, and Zeke confirms. Well, his father had asked the veterans to accompany him on his first official day as an adventurer. Looking around, Zeke sees the hall loud and packed with warriors drinking and brawling, exactly the way he'd imagined it. Flora then points to the reception counter in the back and suggests they take care of the paperwork. So, Zeppard leads the way and calls out to the friendly receptionist working there. Well, this is Elena's, a beautiful young woman who, despite her age, had already been working there for quite a while. The big guy introduces Zeke as the newest adventurer candidate and asks her to start the registration. Elena looks at the boy and asks how old he is, and Zeke calmly replies that he's 12. She explains that he's right at the minimum age limit and hands him a form to fill in his basic info. After that, the receptionist asks him to hold on just a moment while she wraps up the process. Shortly after, Elena returns and hands him a beautiful shiny metal card. She explains that, as a total newbie in the guild, his journey will officially start at the Iron rank. Zeppard explains that the ranks go from Iron all the way up to the legendary Orichalcum, a class so powerful that only 5 of them exist in the entire world. Hearing this, our hero decides that reaching the top of the guild will be his main goal from now on. Now that the registration is done, Zeppard takes him straight to the mission board, where new requests are posted every day. On the board, Zeke sees several options like goblin extermination, medicinal herb gathering, and traveler escorts. The warrior explains that the best missions are snatched up fast by the other adventurers. Since it's Zeke's first day, Zeppard suggests picking a more low-key task to start off without any risk. So he points to a request to collect 2 kilograms of medicinal herbs and monster materials, and Flora agrees it's a good choice. Once outside, the veterans start teasing him about how much Zeke has grown, which leaves the boy pretty embarrassed. As they head toward the forest, the group's mage asks if he'd been training a lot over the past few months, and Zeppard decides to test the boy's knowledge, asking if he knows where the herbs usually grow. Zeke quickly answers that they grow in the shade of the rocks, away from direct sunlight. So, the group follows Zeke's lead and soon finds a huge patch full of the rare plants they needed to gather. The big guy hands them an empty sack so they can start working. Zeke helps with the harvest and hands a bunch of herbs to Lastel, who thanks him with a gentle smile. However, while gathering the plants, the boy hears a strange noise coming from the bushes. Quietly, one of his shadow puppets points into the middle of the vegetation, signaling danger. Zeke uses his shared vision and picks up on a large hostile movement approaching fast. Suddenly, a massive pack of goblins bursts out screaming and charging furiously toward the group. The group is surrounded in seconds, and Zeppard, worried about the number of enemies, draws his sword. Protected by a barrier, the girls start to panic and ask if they should fall back. Granara counts 12 goblins in the area, but Zeke stays calm and questions why they should run. Without hesitation, our hero steps forward and conjures dozens of magic circles all around him. He gives the command and a devastating storm of dark bullets is fired all at once. The projectiles pierce through and instantly wipe out every goblin surrounding the group. The battle ends in seconds, leaving behind nothing but silence and the carcasses of the monsters. Blown away, the warriors rush over to hug Zeke, praising the boy for saving their lives in such a spectacular way. Flora is stunned by his absurd power and asks how he managed to get so strong on his own. She claims the boy already has enough strength to be classified as a silver or gold rank adventurer. That's when Zeke thinks back to the tough, constant training he'd been through since childhood. He takes the moment to keep quietly channeling and sending out mana to keep his shadows active without anyone noticing. Seeing the mage's reaction to Zeke's power, Granara jokes that teaching Flora must have been a real test of patience. But setting the jokes aside, Zeke picks up the heavy sack full of the day's spoils. Zeppard praises the boy's courage for not backing down in the face of the monsters. Granara gets curious about Zeke's current level, but our hero just smiles and doesn't say a single word, preferring to keep his true strength hidden. Zeppard bursts out laughing, joking that he'd be shocked if the boy's level was higher than everyone else's there. As they get close to the guild, Zeke starts wondering how much he'll get as a reward for his first completed job. At the reception counter, the boy tells Elena he's come to report the successful completion of his mission. The receptionist asks for his adventurer card and hands the sack of materials over to another employee to check the contents. A few minutes pass while the guild staff carefully evaluates the items gathered by the group. Shortly after, Elena returns carrying a shiny tray with the young adventurer's well-earned payment. She explains that the harvest earned 1 silver coin and 40 copper coins. Seeing that amount, he realizes that if he keeps saving steadily, he'll soon have enough funds for his big journey. With that, the boy tucks his coins into his bag and the group heads for the exit of the establishment. Zeke thanks the veterans for their help, and Zeppard replies that he'd do anything to support the son of his old partner. With the job done, Flora rubs her hungry stomach and suggests they head straight to the restaurant to grab something to eat. Meanwhile, someone rather suspicious is walking right behind them. She was a mysterious mage with silver hair, and she was pretty excited about something I don't quite know yet. Later on, Zeke walks alone through the city and notices the streets are strangely packed, even though no festival is scheduled. It was the guild's weekly day off, but he'd ended up leaving the house after getting an urgent call from his godfather Zeppard. It had been a week since he became an adventurer, focusing only on simple missions he could handle on his own. Zeke reflects that a beginner's income is really unstable, varying a lot depending on the success of the daily hunts. The monetary system of that world was made up of iron, copper, silver, and gold coins, where 100 of one equaled the next rank up. To give you an idea, a single copper coin bought a loaf of bread, while renting a simple inn cost 80 coppers. It was a very peculiar financial model, and very different from the economy he was used to back on Earth. Luckily, his parents always refused the money he tried to hand over at home, which let him focus all his profits on his future trip. Since his shadows kept hunting even when he was in the city, his passive income of experience and items was fantastic. Suddenly, Flora appears out of nowhere behind him, holding a mug of something to drink and giving the boy a tight hug. Zeke turns completely red and embarrassed, asking why she was already drinking in the middle of the day. Lestel scolds Flora for drinking too much, but the tipsy mage obviously doesn't listen. Zeke then asks the others about the meaning of the tradition everyone in the streets keeps talking about. And Gernara explains that today is graduation day at the Magic Academy, the time when the graduates come to sign up with the guild. Zephyrd adds that a lot of adventurers show up specifically to recruit these new mages for their groups. He explains that most of them prefer safe public jobs in the government, so mages who choose the dangerous life of the guild are rare. At that moment, a procession of academy graduates enters the main hall solemnly. The warrior comments that the event is a golden opportunity for the local groups to bolster their ranks. The receptionist asks everyone to clear the way, while Zephyrd suggests Zeke take the chance to try joining a team. The boy then scans the crowd, weighing the idea of joining up with other warriors. But he quickly turns it down, proudly remembering that he can already use powerful enough spells on his own. Zephyrd bursts out laughing, agreeing that someone capable of firing off such absurd spells really doesn't need a team. Even so, the veteran warns him that working alone has its risks. But the boy insists he's just fine doing his own thing. The official announcement of the graduates' entrance echoes, and the hall goes wild with the arrival of the new mages. The young mages show off their elemental magic to the applause and pushy recruitment offers from the crowd. Gernara then suggests they leave the chaos behind and go grab lunch, inviting Zeke to come along. However, before he can answer, the boy spots the mysterious silver-haired mage walking right past him, and something about her catches his attention. Curious about her enigmatic presence, Zeke turns down the lunch offer at the last second and chases after the girl. Sensing she was being followed, the young woman stops walking right in the middle of the alley. Without turning around, she coldly warns him that she's not there to be recruited, and Zeke tries to explain himself, but annoyed by his persistence, she finally turns around to confront the guy face to face. Zeke is stunned by her beauty, but tries to play it off by asking why she left the guild without accepting any offers. Bluntly and coldly, the beautiful young silver-haired woman declares she plans to work completely alone. He then questions how she plans to survive as a solo adventurer. Out of patience, she tells him to find someone else for his group and starts walking again. But Zeke keeps following her, saying he also has business in that direction. Tired of the chase, she conjures a circle of dark flames and threatens him. Startled by her violent reaction, the boy tries to calm her down by waving his hands and finally introduces himself. Seeing her dispel the spell and start walking again, he runs after her once more, asking for her name. Seeing that the boy isn't giving up, the mysterious young woman finally stops and introduces herself as Eleanor. Zeke asks if she really graduated from the academy, and she confirms proudly that she was the top student in her class. Surprised, the boy asks why the top student would work alone, and she replies that doing things solo is way more efficient. Eleanor adds that since he was able to cancel out her camouflage magic, he must be the type who handles things on his own too. And speaking of that, she's surprised by Zeke's knowledge, asking where all that understanding came from, since he seems to only carry a sword. That's when he shows off his runic mana, explaining he uses both swords and spells, which leaves her pretty intrigued about where his staff is. But Zeke simply says he doesn't use any kind of channeling tool or staff to cast his spells. Eleanor warns him that this only works for basic tricks, but that more advanced magic requires better focuses. However, he assures her that he perfectly masters everything listed in the basic magic book. He also adds that his real trump card in combat is magic. Eleanor admits she's never seen a child as peculiar as him, which leaves the boy slightly annoyed. With a 40-year-old mind and a 12-year-old body, Zeke grumbles that he's the experienced veteran there. Despite that, the boy is excited about the chance of them working together. However, the mage quickly cuts him off, warning that she hasn't actually agreed to form a group with him. She lays out that she'll only make a definitive decision after seeing his runic skills in real combat firsthand. She explains that it's impossible to trust her back to someone without first knowing their real intentions and potential. But Zeke gladly accepts the challenge. Eleanor lets him know she picked up a gathering mission in the forest and demands he defeat a monster right in front of her eyes to pass the test. He accepts and asks that she also show off her spells, since academy theory and actual combat are worlds apart. Between laughs, she tells him not to get caught off guard from behind, while he wonders what kind of magic she'll use. Deep down, Zeke's big goal is still to become the strongest in the world. He wants to prove his hypothesis that by applying idle game logic in another world, he'll reach the legendary Orichalcum rank. Even though his level keeps going up passively, even if he does nothing, his plan has changed a bit now. His journey to prove this theory will be infinitely more fun if he has someone trustworthy by his side. And so, the two of them head off together toward the forest. Zeke warns her that monsters are starting to appear around there and says he's counting on her support, but Eleanor immediately cuts him off, reminding him she hasn't agreed to form a group yet. Even so, there they were, walking side by side through the forest. Zeke has already reached level 10 and can now sustain 125 puppets hunting non-stop in the depths. But of course, that hunt with dark magic is an absolute secret, since he prefers to keep his 4th level spell as an ace up his sleeve. Further ahead, Eleanor stops after noticing some tracks onto the ground, and warns she's going to locate the creature so they don't waste time searching aimlessly. The mage focuses and casts her tracking spell. A massive complex magic circle glows beneath her feet. She warns him she's located some herbs nearby, but her expression quickly changes as she senses a dangerous presence coming their way fast. That's when 4 acid frogs come leaping in at high speed, and the mage quickly alerts him that they're only 50 meters away. Calmly, Zeke says he's ready and asks her to pay close attention to his combat skills. With a quick motion of his hands, he materializes 3 magic circles and fires off his dark bullets. But when he notices the creatures trying to dodge the projectiles, he's already preparing his next move. With a quick command, he activates the spell Shadowgrave, making massive dark spikes rise from the ground and impale the monsters. Noticing the last survivor leaping toward them, Zeke warns his partner, and Eleanor reduces it to ashes using her fire arrows. With the battle over, the boy thanks her for the help. Eleanor compliments him, saying his dodges and his ability to cast 3rd-level spells without incantations are far from the work of an amateur. Flattered by the praise from the Academy's top student, the boy breaks into a huge grin. She comments that it's a shame he doesn't use a staff, since that would make channeling his mana way more efficient. He explains that he always trained bare-handed at home, and that somehow it feels much easier to fight without carrying an object. Zeke remembers when he tried to use his mother's staff as a kid and ended up with a terrible headache from all the built-up mana. While gathering the fangs from the fallen frogs, the boy listens to Eleanor's explanation of how staves prevent the waste of energy in combat. She continues her lecture, saying the true goal of a mage is to cast fast while spending little mana, and reveals that she hates hand-to-hand combat. Zeke agrees with her logic, but reflects that solo adventurers can't afford the luxury of avoiding physical combat. While extracting the red runic stones from the monster, he listens to his partner insist that training only spells is the fastest path to the top. Cutting off the mage's lecture, Zeke suddenly asks her to hold out her hands, and tosses her the red magic stones he just collected. Then, Zeke suggests they head over to the spot where she detected the rare herbs to wrap up the request quickly. Surprised by his generous gesture, Eleanor turns red and shyly asks if he doesn't mind talking with her. She confesses that she never managed to fit in very well at the Magic Academy because of her strong, prickly personality with people, but he assures her that it doesn't bother him one bit, revealing that he's also the loner type and that he loves hearing what she has to say. And so, the two of them spend the whole day hunting and chatting, deepening their bond of friendship as they walk back to the city. Passing through the local market, the boy asks about her plans for the coming days, and she replies that she'll keep training on her own for a while. But Eleanor admits she'd love to team up with him again in the future. Well, of course, Zeke accepts the invitation on the spot. Taking advantage of the moment, he invites her to have dinner at his family's restaurant, describing the place as a classic hangout spot for adventurers. Walking through the front door, the boy announces his arrival and is greeted by his father, who freezes on the spot the moment he notices who was accompanying his son that night. Eleanor bows politely and introduces herself. Right after, his mother appears from the kitchen and, amazed by the girl's uniform, excitedly asks if she's a mage from the famous academy. With a bright smile from ear to ear, the mother sweetly asks Eleanor to take good care of her son, which leaves Zeke super embarrassed. The boy quickens his pace and explains that she only helped him with a guild mission, and that he brought her to the restaurant just to try their amazing food. Sitting at a nearby table, the guild veterans start laughing and teasing Zeke, joking that the boy grew up so fast and already knows how to charm the girls. Annoyed with the jokes, Zeke tells the warriors to shut it. Minutes later, Zeke's father serves up a steaming platter of special venison steak. Eleanor tries to refuse at first, but happily accepts after the boy's parents insist on covering the meal since they were former adventurers themselves. Upon taking her first bite, the mage is completely blown away by the indescribable flavor of the meat. During dinner, the mother tells Eleanor about how Zeke was always a reserved boy, obsessed with magical studies since childhood. Seeing the great harmony between his mother and his partner, Zeke smiles as he predicts Eleanor will start hanging around the restaurant a lot from now on. The next day, our young adventurer arrives at the guild bright and early to pick out new jobs. That's when Eleanor appears at his side, asking if he's already found any interesting missions for the day. Ever since that dinner, the friendship between the two grew stronger, and even without going on missions together, they ended up meeting every day at the same time at the guild. The boy shows her a rough flyer and explains that for that day, he decided to just pick up some simple, danger-free odd jobs around the city. Well, she looks at the paper and is pretty surprised to find out that the guild also offers mundane gardening and weeding missions for the rookies. Zeke explains that the client's yard is overrun with weeds, and the mage compliments the practical usefulness of using regular odd jobs to bring in income and promote his restaurant. And so, after happily saying goodbye at the entrance, the two head off in different directions down the cobblestone street to take care of their daily tasks. Once at the location, Zeke channels his runic mana manipulation ability to yank out the weeds, making life easier for a kind elderly woman with back pain. Surprised to see such a young boy handling mana so effortlessly, the old woman showers him with praise. With a gentle smile on her face, the elderly woman signs the runic completion form and encourages the young warrior to keep pushing himself in the future. Then, she hands him the official stamped paper for the mission, Zeke says goodbye, and the kind elderly woman calls out from a distance to let him know she added a bonus reward in coins for the excellent work. However, on the way back, he spots Eleanor carrying a huge pile of heavy stones at a construction site and wonders if this was the transportation job she'd chosen. The boy remembers her proud words about using spells efficiently. Intrigued by that concept, Zeke decides to check on his own runic progress. Through his shared vision, he watches the shadow puppets carving the numbers of monsters eliminated into the ground since he reached level 10. Zeke knows that as his level goes up, the required number of monsters also increases, and his cap of 125 active puppets soon won't be enough. He remembers his past life with a bit of nostalgia, reflecting that this real world was quite different from mobile games, where you just had to tap the screen to clear a stage. However, since he was reincarnated into this RPG reality, our boy decides to use all his creativity to level up as fast as possible. With that, he decides to make a big runic upgrade to his shadow puppets. Locked away in his room, Zeke starts sketching new runic circles, focused on replacing the humanoid structure with something more efficient. After that inspiring conversation about magical efficiency with Eleanor, he spent the last few days totally focused on optimizing his mana consumption. His main goal was to drastically cut the energy cost per summoned unit, letting him significantly increase the size of his army. He theorizes that if he shrank the size of the creations or ditched the humanoid form altogether, he wouldn't have to spend extra mana materializing dark swords. Unlike the previous changes, Zeke decides to rewrite the magic circle so drastically that he ends up creating a completely original, one-of-a-kind spell. The next day, right after finishing his obligations at the guild, he runs off to the depths of the forest and places his hand on the ground to test the new summoning. Since it's a spell created from scratch by himself, Zeke doesn't have to recite any old-fashioned incantations, but he decides to give a mighty name to his new, mysterious creation. At that very moment, a majestic and imposing dark wolf emerges from the magic circle. Zeke celebrates, seeing that the summoning worked perfectly. He feels proud creating something entirely out of his own ideas, and without any instructions from the basic books. To test its obedience, he orders the wolf to run around and bite a nearby tree. In an instant, the wolf destroys the trunk with a single bite, revealing that the mix of earth magic gave physical mass to the shadows, letting them attack without needing runic swords. He tests intangible mode and delivers a sword strike that passes right through the wolf's body, confirming the creature will become immune to physical attacks during combat. With the mana cost drastically reduced, the boy gets ready to expand his army, and summons an absurd amount of 190 wolves all at once. Then, Zeke points to the darkness of the trees and orders his new army to begin the automatic hunt immediately. The next morning, our boy wakes up in his room feeling something wet nudging against his face. He opens his eyes to find one of his shadow wolves sitting next to the bed, wagging its tail excitedly to say good morning. Zeke pets the wolf, and upon checking his runic status, is stunned to notice his level shot up incredibly fast, reaching level 12 while he slept. The boy is thrilled to have created an extremely powerful spell that also works as excellent animal therapy. But suddenly, he remembers an important detail and mentions that he still needs to test the last runic function that was left over from the day before. Through the wolf's vision, he watches the shadow pack surround and mercilessly tear apart a monster deep in the forest. Well, the wolves act like black holes, absorbing the bodies and runic stones to keep other adventurers from figuring out his evolution secret. However, something was wrong. The materials and runic stones were being digested and destroyed inside the wolves' stomachs. A little discouraged, he scratches his head, realizing he'll have to make new runic upgrades to finally achieve the perfect idle lifestyle. A week after creating his new hunting partners and optimizing his experience, Zeke heads toward the guild. At the reception counter, he collects his coins for the job completed that day. While counting the money in his bag, he realizes that even though he saved up a decent amount of silver, he'll still need much more to travel the world. The boy reflects that he needs to find a quick way to collect the valuable items dropped by the monsters. That's when Eleanor shows up. The two chat about their daily missions, and the mage admits she's finally getting used to the hectic routine of an adventurer. She shyly asks if they could have dinner together again that night at his parents' restaurant. And of course, Zeke accepts the invitation with a huge smile. Meanwhile, at that very same time, a group of adventurers is trying to escape a terrible band of goblins, led by a colossal hobgoblin. Without a chance, one of the warriors is brutally crushed by the giant monster. The survivors flee, unable to understand how a beast of such a high rank appeared there. Meanwhile, Zeke celebrates another creation, a small pouch attached to the wolves' collars. The boy has managed to recreate the famous magic bag from games, capable of storing an infinite amount of items with no weight or space limit. He explains that he carved the rune of the Black Swamp spell directly into the pouch, creating a dimensional shadow portal that keeps everything that enters it. To test the new creation, he orders his shadow wolf to step into the pouch. Zeke had this brilliant idea after seeing some regular leather bags displayed at a merchant's stall. With that, the big problem of manually collecting loot after battles was finally 100% solved. Since leaving valuable items behind after battles is an unacceptable waste in any game, Zeke summons his new pack of collector wolves. He orders the group to hunt as a pack and sets the pouch bearer as the leader in charge of storing all the runic stones and enemy fangs. Our hero lets out an evil laugh, imagining the absurd amount of coins and experience he'll rack up completely passively from now on. The next day, Zeke arrives at the guild ready to work, but immediately notices the main hall is strangely loud and tense. That's when Zephyrd reveals that a dangerous hobgoblin has appeared in the forest south of the city. The warrior adds that the monster caused terrible casualties and that the survivors are severely wounded. He points to the announcement board in the back and warns that an investigation mission in the southern forest has just been posted with urgency. Zeke grumbles a bit about the exhausting investigation work, though he admits the coin reward offered by the guild is pretty tempting. Hearing that, Zephyrd shows a mission paper with even better returns and says goodbye to the boy. Zeke tries to get close to the board to read the details of the announcement, but a crowd of big warriors completely blocks his view. Preferring to stick to simpler tasks for now, he decides to turn around and pulls a regular mission notice off the board. Little did he know that in the forest, Eleanor was wounded, crying, and cornered by the monsters.